Hey guys, this is Mark with NCEngravers, and today we're going to be talking about the Holosun SCS optic. The idea here is we have a lot of requests of what's it going to take to get this optic onto my slide. We've brought out several different slides today, everything from a 43 to a 48 to a 19X to a 20 to a 40, right? So we've got the range of stuff that's out here today. And the idea behind this optic, and I know there's a lot of content on YouTube, I would encourage you to go to YouTube. Just spend a little bit more time with some of the bigger named people on here that discuss this optic a little bit more, and no doubt you're going to find out more information about it. But in a nutshell, this optic fits on an optic-ready slide, and there's some differences between an optic-ready slide and a non-optic-ready MOS slide, and I want to discuss those today. Not only are we going to have some issues with that socket, we're also going to have issues with it on smaller weapons, which we also see a lot of requests for as well. So guys, we're going to open this up. We're going to kind of discuss all the problems with this optic and how it may fit your needs, or how you may want to just steer from it altogether. All right, so once again, you guys kind of know how this is. It's got a little box here. We've got a bunch of stuff. We're not going to go over that. We have an optic. Looks just like this. And we're going to set this aside as well. It does come with a pack of screws. That pack of screws fits into a factory gun. So we're going to start with the factory setup, and then we're going to move into pretty much all of the issues that we're going to run into, and then hopefully by the end of the video I have a clear understanding of what is going to be offered and how that fits your needs. This happens to be a Glock 40 Gen 4. It is an MOS factory cut socket, and basically it's going to fit like that. Now keep in mind, on the larger slides like the 40, which isn't your typical gun, the optic actually sits inside of the socket and is not flush with the outside. You guys can probably see that, and we'll include some pictures, but there is a gap here. There's kind of a ledge on this side, and there's also one, of course, on the other side. This is what it looks like, though. Once again, we will include some pictures so that way you guys can see this is a little bit better. The serrations do align, or roughly align, with the factory rear serrations. It's a nice setup. Obviously, it's super low on the slide. This is one of the reasons why the SCS is such a sought-after optic for the Glocks, because of the way that it lays, right? So guys, we're going to pull this off here, and then I want to talk about, and I'm just going to put it over here, we want to talk about some of the differences between an MOS and what else is going on out here. So we're going to first start with similarities with slides that are close to the same size, and then we're going to go right into the smaller stuff. So on the 40, you're going to notice that, and some of you may not be aware of this, so I'm going to educate you here a little bit. On an MOS gun, the rear iron sight is moved farther to the rear, okay? So we see this a lot on some of the guns that we really see it a lot on, like the G34s. It's actually almost problematic because the because the iron sights hang over the rear of the slide. But as you can see, this is actually cut farther to the rear, and if we look at this a little closer, we won't be able to get them exact because we have the front barrel lockup area. But when we align these pretty close, you can kind of also see the differences there. On the right is obviously the 40, and on the left is the G20. So, yeah, it kind of comes up being one of those deals where the slides really are not built the same. A lot of people have this idea that an MOS slide is nothing more than an optic-ready model slide, but it's the same as my standard model. And, you know, unfortunately, that is not correct. We see this a lot on the market with different makes and model slides. It's not just Glock that's done this. You know, we see this in the Hellcat. The rear iron sight's been moved to the rear. We see it in the platform for the P10s through CZ. That rear iron sight has been moved to the rear for an optic-ready model. We've seen it several times on the core models of the Smith & Wesson M&Ps. Once again, smaller rear sight, optic socket has been moved back. So it's kind of one of those deals. It's not uncommon to see a change in what they would call an MOS or an optic-ready model slide, right? So, but the idea here is, how do we get that guy onto one of these that doesn't have this dovetail moved to the rear? And if you look, we'll include a picture, but if you look, you can kind of see where that dovetail is, and you can kind of see that it just hangs slightly over the first serration, just a little bit. So let's take a look at, once again, this guy. And you can kind of see it is significantly farther forward, right? So the serrations are technically in the same place. It happens to just be the dovetail. That's not the only issue that we run into with these larger slides. If you take a look at this, the 40 once again and the 20, and you put them side by side, these are both larger slides. You're going to notice that these would be what you would consider to be a Gen 4 or older, and they have a round plunger instead of the ovalish plunger that's in the new ones. You can kind of see they're in the same position, pretty close, right? But then if we take, and once again, these are kind of sort of in the same family because it's a 20 and a 40, right? They're very large. If we take a 19X here as an example, and we put them side by side, you're going to notice that that plunger not only has a different style, but it's also moved closer to the rear of the slide because it's not as long. If I move my hands here just a little bit more, we may be able to actually see where the barrel hole is. And you guys can see the difference in this one's obviously moved farther to the rear. It's just plain shorter from the rear of the gun to where the barrel locks up is really what it comes down to, right? So that also causes an issue when we're talking about putting an optic on a slide, and how does that lay with this plunger right here, right? So on some guns, there's a possibility of cutting. You may never run into that issue just because of that model. It's a little bit further back, right? You guys can kind of see that. In other ones, it's nothing but a problem because we don't have as much distance between the rear of the slide and the plunger, and then again, we've got an issue with the dovetail. So a lot of different things going on here when we're talking about causing problems. So let's talk about the smaller. Let's talk about the 48, right? One of the biggest issues we have with the 48 is it hangs over the sides. If you guys want to see this a little better, because the top is rolled, it's got a curve here, so we can actually just take it and put it on the bottom of the slide because the width of the slide doesn't change from the sides, it only changes from the top down. So that's how much it hangs over. Okay, so it's kind of just a no-go. I know a lot of you guys are like, hey, I've got an MOS, right, 43X or whatever, can I just modify that socket? Guys, it's the same issue we run into. It hangs over the sides. These are going to be pointed edges that we can't adjust. And then we run into, we're straight up into the plunger, like way into the plunger, and once again, just for the sake of appearance, that's what it looks like on the bottom. So if you want to kind of see, hangover is pretty nasty. So as far as your smaller slides go, you know, the 48s, the 43s, anything along that line, I wouldn't even consider it. It just doesn't make any sense. It's going to snag on stuff. It's not going to fit the socket. It's not going to align right. There just isn't any reason to do it. It's a bad application for that build, right? So let's go back into this. I want to talk briefly about the 19. The 19 is an interesting one. The 19X, the 19, the 45, the 17, the 26, 27. Guys, these are all pretty much the same slide in the back zone, okay? So regardless of how long the barrel is and how long the front of this is, and it's got serrations or it doesn't have serrations, none of this really matters. What matters is from here to here is about the same on all the full-sized guns, okay? So a lot of that comes into the iron sight is the same distance to the plunger hole, and it's either going to be a problem or it's not. So let's just talk about putting this in front, okay? Once again, this has been moved forward. You can kind of see where that dovetail is. It's pretty far forward in comparison to where it would be if this iron sight was moved back and it was just breaking into that first serration. So if we could put it here, we definitely are going to have an issue with this plunger hole. I know a lot of you guys are saying, well, there's a cutout there. You know, you're not referencing the cutout. There is a cutout here. There is a recessed socket on, if you're looking at the gun this way, and for right here, which would go over that plunger hole a little bit. But guys, keep in mind, it's not really the same because the optic is already pressed back further, and it's not really under that plunger hole as much as you think it is because it's already set back. Okay, so it's not just a raised piece of metal or a recessed socket in the optic. It's actually just moved farther to the rear, so it's not covering as much of that plunger. So with that being said, guys, some of the other issues that we're going to run into is if you kind of look at the serrations on the optic itself, and if you align these with wherever you're hoping they'll fit, that's kind of where they would go. Like if you look, these, you know, I'm roughing this out, but you guys get the idea. This is roughly where they would go. But look at the gap that you have to have in front of the rear iron sight to align the serrations, and then this one doesn't go with anything. And then you're really far into the plunger hole. So this obviously causes a problem. If you were to align these correctly, and I am working behind the camera, so I'm going to do my best here. If you were to align these correctly, you'd probably be here, and I say that because if you go any farther back, what's going to end up happening is you're going to have a serration here that doesn't align with the first one. So we've kind of aligned them here, and then the back is just neither here nor there for this application. But right there is pretty close to where they would go. And, you know, once again, you can kind of see we would have half of a dovetail left over, right? So we've got to make a decision. We have to figure out what the solution is. If you're just dead set on having this done, what's it gonna look like, right? We've got several different Glock slides here that we may end up using the 19X as a comparison of a before and an after, because we have other sites here. You know, if you put it right over the dovetail and you cut the dovetail off, then you get into, you know, will it fit? You know, this is where it would go if we were doing it right over the dovetail and it was just straight up gone. But then you run into, and this somewhat aligns, but now you have a serration up here. You can kind of see this. And it's mostly because there's, you know, the serrations don't completely align here. On the MOS gun, there's a serration that we wouldn't be using, which is back here between the iron sight and between the sockets. So this is why there's one extra left over. So no matter how you build this configuration, there's going to be one in the front, there's going to be one in the back left over that don't align with the optic because it doesn't align with the MOS one. So, you know, we're going to work through this. We're going to see exactly how this is going to work. I'm definitely going to have a different thought process once we've gone through the process of cutting a slide, putting it on, how does it fit, how does it mount, what does it look like, and then I'm going to tell you guys what's going to be offered, right? So I'm going to give you guys that opinion of this is probably what you should do, or if you do this, this is what's going to happen. Guys, so I think at this time what we need to do is we need to get a slide over to the CNC machine. We need to do a little bit of cut work. We need to figure out exactly how to get this guy on one of these. Let's bring it back. Let's take a look and see exactly how it comes out. Alright guys, we have completed the cut work, we've mounted the optic, we've installed a new set of iron sights. I want to go into a couple of things. Now that I've done the work, it's been completed on an actual factory Glock slide. I want to give you my opinion. There's a couple things we didn't talk about at the beginning of the video that we do need to talk about here towards the end of the video, just to further explain this a little bit more. So, first and foremost, optic. We went ahead and put that to the rear of the slide. We cut a new dovetail. We set that up with a new iron sight here at the front of the slide. We recoated the slide. Guys, I want to talk about that in further detail, and then we're going to move on. So, first and foremost, this is the first slide we cut. So as a new service, this is one of ours, it's not a customer's, and it's just kind of a trial and error, a test and tune, if you want to call it that, of how does it work, how should it work. After reviewing all the details and all the options of the work, and then moving into the work on our end, I had decided that cutting the optic to the rear of the slide and cutting a new dovetail is probably the only configuration we're going to offer. Okay, so what that means is you are able to process your order with just a rear socket and no dovetail, or you have the option of adding the front of optic dovetail during the process order. So whenever you place your order, hey, I just want to do the rear cut, no iron sight, not a big deal to me, or I want to add the front of optic dovetail to the order. That can all be done, you know, at the same time of when you're putting that order in, and then of course we will we'll put the iron sight in for you. So, guys, you know, one of the changes I would make here is once again, since it's new to us, is I would probably shift this a little bit further forward. If you look, I do think there's a little bit of room for adjustment. It looks like it's off a little bit. Now, one of the things I do understand is that the optic itself seems, when you look at it real careful, that the serrations, they're not quite exactly the same thickness as the slide, and I've seen this before with optic plates and with different things on the factory slide where they don't 100% line up in a straight line. I do think that we're going to try to get that maybe just a little bit closer going on, move it a few thou forward. I think we're going to just see it be become a little bit more matured out in there. It's not bad. I mean, we're not far off, right? But these are the little things that sometimes you will see as that will adjust the pattern. It will evolve over time. So keep that in mind when you guys are watching this video that, hey, a year from now, it may look totally different, or we may have done something completely different that we haven't thought of right now. So I want to talk about iron sights, and then I want to move into the actual cut itself. So, you know, one of the things is whenever you do an iron sight cut on this slide, you are above the plunger hole. We will go into the plunger hole itself, okay? You know, the big question is, does this cause a problem? Is there some sort of modification that's going to have to take place to that plunger or to that spring in the event that you want to upgrade it, you want to change it, you want to know what you're getting into? To answer that question best is, yes, we do cut into the plunger hole. There's no way of getting around that just because of the way the depth of the dovetail is, the way how the hole is recessed into the slide. Functionally, there's no change. Okay, so you don't have to do anything to your spring. You don't have to cut down your your plunger on the inside. Everything works according to plan. We will show you guys that. So these are just basically factory internals with optic iron sights having been upgraded. So there's no big deal there. One of the requests that we do have is that if you are going to have a dovetail done on your weapon, you do need to provide the iron sight at the time of work. So that way we can put it in, we can make sure. There's a lot of different versions of iron sights that are out on the market. Some are flat on the bottom, some are cupped on the bottom. They're just different, and we want to make sure that we aren't running into something that we haven't seen before. And because we have a lot of experience on our end, we want to make sure that we're able to solve that problem before it goes back to you. And then, of course, we can encourage new customers about if there is some sort of configuration issue with a certain model iron sight. Guys, let's talk about iron sights more as well. So, as you can see, we do have a little bit of a separation between the optic and the iron sight. There is a little bit of a gap there. There is a little bit of room for some change. I'm going to put this down. I want to show you what we've done and kind of how we go about doing that. So first and foremost, the best way to say this is the pack, or this is the model iron sight, and it came from this pack, which is the GT-532. These are what would be considered a 43, 42, 48 set of iron sights. You don't have to use that. I just went with something that we had here. I went with something that was a little bit closer to the center. The hole is actually more so on this side, and you can see there is no there's no exposure of the hole, so it's not like we're still seeing some of that hole left over. That is a really nice, and we will include some pictures, but you can kind of see where we're at with that now. That is a really nice setup, really, really low setup, not covering too much of the window itself. I happen to like that a little bit, so that's one of the reasons why we ended up going with the GT-532 iron sights. Now, I know a couple of the questions that you have, and that is, what about some of the factory sights that are already out there? Like on the 19X. On the 19X, these hang over further in the back, okay? So if you go through the two of these, you're going to notice, and just by putting them side by side, you're going to notice that obviously this one's much larger. It is the correct width iron sight for the slide, and then this one's smaller, so you can kind of see that. They obviously both take the same cutout, but if you look carefully, we'll include a picture, you can kind of tell that this one hangs over the back of that dovetail, so we can get you quite a bit further than this. So this is a lot closer than what this is. This is going to cause a problem. This is, if you were to put this on here, it's actually going to hit your optic, so these would need to be replaced. If you're sending in a 19X and you're just kind of like, hey, I want to go ahead and use the factory sights that I have, you're going to run into a problem. You're going to need to change those out to either the amazing plastic clock sights that come with them. I know everybody loves those. Or you're going to want to go with something that doesn't hang over the back quite as far as what would be your factory. Now, we've got some other ones here. This is a really old set. I'm not even quite sure where this came from. So this is like a true glow set. It's super dirty. I'm actually just going to pull it out. The iron sight itself, I believe in here, is new. It's been sitting in a drawer for I'm not even sure how long. So the idea is, once again, hangs over the rear quite a bit. Once this goes into, this socket, it's going to be way into the issue of where the it's going to be way up into the optic. So make sure you're not ordering something like this. Once again, this is another 43, 48, 43X kind of iron sight. So don't, try not to go with something like that. That's obviously going to cause a problem with your setup. I know there's a lot of you out there that are curious. Hey, this is a socket for an MOS. Dude, get to the plate stuff. Yeah, so that's another set of iron sights that could be put in here. They're not both in here. There's only a front sight in here, but most definitely most people would go with something like a GL 429 when they were running with a set of standard suppressor sights. If you want to go with something a little bit taller, this is the 526. There's a lot of different versions between these two out there. We haven't tested a plate on the socket with iron sights to give you a recommendation yet. So a lot of people would go with these. If you're just going to do an optic cut, hey, I want to just do a standard optic cut, not a MOS, this is what you would go with, a GL 429 or GL 329. If you're going with something like a 509T that's super tall, you'd probably go with something like this, which is the 526. They're really, really tall, and they're kind of hard to find unless you're going to order them through AmeriGlow, and you're going to wait on that. So that's kind of it when it comes down to the details of the iron sights. I want to talk about the color a little bit, and then I want to assemble it so that we actually have all the rest of the parts here for one of our other guns that we have on hand. So we're going to go ahead and put it together. So the color on this is Pew Pewter. So it's a different color that we've kind of concocted together with a couple different blends of flavors. I know what you're thinking. You're like, man, that sure looks a lot like Glacier Silver. I want to show you guys what that does look like here. So we've got a couple of plates here. This is actually satin aluminum. Okay, I'm going to put this down. I do want to go through this for a second with you guys to talk about this color. This is satin aluminum, and this is Glacier Silver, and these two are almost identical. I'm going to put them in the same hand. Okay, satin aluminum, Glacier Silver. The deal behind this is a lot of people say, oh, I see you offer Glacier Silver, but there's a satin aluminum out there. Can you do that? We could order a bottle. You know, if there's something that we don't stock, we can order you a bottle. But these two are so close in color that you almost can probably not tell the difference, and I don't see a reason to pay for a bottle of coloring when honestly they're just so close. Unless your gun was colored in one and you had an example beside you, right beside it, I don't think you can tell the difference. As far as it goes with our new color, which is Pew Pewter, that is the difference in the color, and I know it's going to be hard to see because we're kind of coloring. I'm going to move these to the side. So you can see ours is just a shade darker. We were looking for something that still had that satin look to it, but wasn't right in the Glacier Silver, that brighter color scheme. So this is a little bit darker than what you see on those two. So if you're curious about that, you can see more examples of that. That is a new color that we're offering. If you do go to our webpage, there is a under service. There is a Cerakote tab that does show all the colors. And this is one of the colors in there. Of course, during checkout, you get a list and you can choose your color. We can always add something back to the order if it's a color that we don't provide. Guys, one of the only other guns I have here that's a Gen 5 is with a bunch of red parts. So we're going to put a bunch of red parts in here. And one of this idea here is just to kind of show you functionality of this guy down here, because I know there's some of you guys that are just curious about that. So just basically everything's just a factory part. This is not a factory barrel, but the rest of these are just factory parts, right? And then, of course, mag. And that's it. Let's pull this guy out. So, as always, triggers down. And, of course, we could do it the other way. So, that's kind of a functionality for those of you that are curious. I want to talk about the plate systems. I want to talk about what might happen, what you might get into. So one of the things I want to say about the MOS socket here is that this cut is, I'm going to say this as polite as I can. I'm going to explain it the best I can, and hopefully you guys can understand where I'm coming from. On a standard slide that you guys decide that you want to do this optic, okay, so you guys decide that you want to do the SCS optic. Does it fit the MOS socket? Sure does. What we're not going to do is we're not going to kind of encourage you to use a plate system on there. Of course, it's the same socket. We have not tested this, but since the optic fits the socket, the plates should technically fit the socket. And the idea here is that you could go and buy an MOS plate, and you could use a, Trijicon RMR. You could use, obviously there's a range of optics you can use at that point because it is the plate system for that. And you could upgrade this to a suppressor sight in the front. This spacing is designed for a suppressor sight, right? So everything is in place for you to say, hey, I could run this optic. I love it. or I hate it later on, and I can change it. Yes, you can do that. What we're not going to do is we're not going to chase a problem that we didn't create. And what I mean by that is there are a lot of plates that are out on the system that, out on the market that fit the system that are not Glock plates. Aftermarket plates that go in here that use a microdot optic like a K model with a dovetail in the back. Just a lot of different configurations, stuff for the Leopold Delta Point Pro. And what we're not going to do is, oh, hey, I had my gun cut for this optic and I've got an issue with my plate. Whatever. I snapped a screw off. I did this. Something doesn't fit. Something doesn't align right or it's misaligned. That's not what we're offering on the webpage and as a service. Okay. What we are offering is the option of having your firearm slide cut for this optic. Okay. That is what we are doing as service work. You will be required to provide the SCS at the time of work. If you've got a plate and you're like, hey man, I know there's no guarantees this will work. Can you just see if it fits the socket? I want to just know for peace of mind that it will work in case I want to do that in the future. Sure, I can shoot you an email back or text you back and say, yeah, the plate fits the socket as intended. It should work as intended. But what we're not what we're not going to do is chase a bunch of problems. Hey, I bought a plate on eBay. It doesn't seem to fit. It's a little too tight. When I screw it down, there's a gap, or for some reason it's off to the right or it's off to the left. Those aren't problems that we're going to chase because we're just not in the market for cutting the MOS socket for a plate system, right? I do believe there's a couple companies that are out there that do that. That's just not what we're doing. As far as the fit and finish goes here, and once again, we'll be adjusting the optic to the serrations, which it's really not that far off, as you guys can probably tell there. But it is kind of a dedicated fit. It doesn't hang over the sides. It's a clean look. It doesn't hang, it doesn't drag. I mean, it's a nice optic for this setup if that's what you're wanting to go with. But once again, just because you have additional options and things that you could do doesn't necessarily mean they're my problem. And I say that as polite as I can. We're not in the market for manufacturing plates. We're not in the market for doing that. At some point in time, feel free to leave your opinion. Maybe we'll make a plate system that is specific to us, that we would warranty, that we would take care of if there was some sort of a problem. But right now we are cutting a socket for an optic, and it's just the exact same. There's a line down the center, there's a ridge down the center, there's a recessed hole over here. On this side, you can see we've cut out. I mean, we really have taken the time to create the exact same socket as the MOS, but I don't want to chase problems that aren't mine because the eBay plate doesn't work or you snap something off or whatever the case is. So that is one of the reasons that we do require you to provide the optic at the time of work, because I know that's kind of what's going on there, and I can align it, I can fit it, I can mount it, I can make sure we don't have an issue with the iron sights, those kind of things. So hopefully you guys can understand where I'm coming from there. As being such a small shop of myself, my wife, and we do have one other employee that works in the office. We hope to grow at some point in time. We hope to move into another building at some point in time. Unfortunately, we don't target the market on certain things that we can't manage because we don't have the people. Okay, hopefully that came out the best and you understand where I'm coming from. If you were a master mechanic somewhere, and by no means am I saying I'm a master, but if you're a master mechanic somewhere and you're really good at doing something, you don't need to be that guy who's doing everything else. That's taking away from what you should be doing because you're a true professional at what you're doing. Does that kind of make sense? Hopefully you guys can understand that just slightly better by saying it that way. Excuse me. So with that being said, guys, I would encourage you to follow along on Instagram. I'd encourage you to follow along on Facebook. It does help other people find our videos when you guys like the videos, right? It costs you nothing to hit a thumbs up. It costs you nothing to leave a comment, and we do appreciate that. It also costs you nothing to go to our Googles and leave a review. If you've had work done through us and you haven't left a review, we would encourage you to do that. It helps other people find us. It gives other people the peace of mind and the confidence of processing orders through us. So it kind of ends up helping us, and it may not cost you anything to actually do that. In my opinion, you're supporting a business that you like and love, and hopefully at some point in time, when the time is ready, you're actually processing work through, right? So hopefully that's an encouraging thing for you guys to take a moment and do that. As far as other things go, man, we've got other projects that we're working on. This was something that kind of moved to the front of the line because it's an optic that came out on the market and it is starting to become available in the hands of individuals. One of the last things we didn't cover, and I know what you're thinking, and that is, could the socket be cut on something else? Could you put this socket on another model weapon that's not a Glock. Is that a possibility? With that being said, I think if it would fit in the realm of the iron sight and where the barrel locks up, I think it could be done. Some of the issues you might run into is the optics too wide. Of course, the serrations aren't going to match up. So you have a lot of overlooking to do. Okay, so I guess that's the best way to say it. Hey, I've got a, I'm just going to use it as an example. Hey, I've got an M&P and I want to have this plate system cut for it. Can we do that? I understand serrations may be a problem. I understand it may hang over. In my mind, and I say it in one hand and I mean it on another, technically we are creating a MOS Glock style plate system. That means other optics could be used in the same socket. Once again, you guys have heard it, don't want to warranty that type of problem, but it does allow for individuals to finally have that door opened up to, wow, I could run this on my, fill in the blank what your gun is, if it fits. So it is, this is one of the reasons why we've always steered away from doing these sockets, because it's like Pandora's box of opportunity, and it could be the greatest thing that's ever happened, or it could be an absolute nightmare because the individual doesn't understand the concept that we actually cut the socket for one thing. We did not cut it for the worldwide plate system of opportunity for failure. So have that in your mind, understand where that's coming from, understand the ramifications of doing work on a slide that it really may not come out as you're hoping for. Hopefully we've answered almost all the questions around this optic. Pass it around, share the video. It's going to help you as an individual who wants to have this process through another vendor. It's going to help the other vendor understand it as well. Okay, when we talk about hitting a plunger hole, we talk about aligning, we talk about where it's got to go. These are all things that other vendor, if you're not using us, has to also think about and figure out how to process. And this video may encourage them to have the work done correctly, or to say, I'm not getting into this. And then you can understand exactly what's going on. So, it's not just always you send to us and you're reviewing us or whatever. Sometimes when this stuff gets passed out, it is somewhat of an informational, educational video across the spectrum of what we're doing in the firearm industry, and how does it help you with that work being processed through another vendor. So opportunities there to obviously take pieces away from this and advice away from this, even if you're not using us. Guys, hopefully you've enjoyed the content. Leave a review if you have an opportunity. Subscribe if you haven't already. You can catch me on the next one.